All right, David.
Excellent.
What?
Sorry I'm late.
Awesome. No, no, not a problem. Not a problem at all. Thank you very much, man. I'm so excited to have you on today. This is awesome.
All right, sorry. Still battling my phone. Here we go. I think this works.
Okay,
All
cool.
right, all right.
First and foremost, let me say thank you for the time today. This is absolutely, awesome. I appreciate it, and I'm really excited to dig into this stuff, man.
My pleasure. My pleasure.
So here on Growing on You Live, let me, just kind of break it down a little bit. Starting off, I have one introduction question. The remainder of the interview is about you and your craft, your career in film, and then I have one finale question that I wrote just for this episode. So kicking things off, I wanted to ask you as far as my wife and I doing some traveling. If we're coming through Atlanta, what's a local spot to you that we would have to try, just a local eatery that's something that's a local favorite of yours that we would have to stop by? And what do we try there?
Yeah, Fat Matt's Rib Shack. You gotta hit.
I've heard of that. Okay.
Yeah. If you're on the barbecue front, I'd say Ria's Bluebird is the breakfast spot down off Memorial.
Oh, okay.
I'd say if you want a cocktail, you want to like lounge around and hang, Carroll Street's where it's at. It's like right in the center of Cabbagetown.
Okay.
Cabbagetown, Atlanta. There's no other place like it. Yeah.
Okay, nice. I love asking those things just because we do, kind of make our way abouts and go to different spots, and as far as doing something other than looking on a Google or some shit that it might just pop up someone that's from the area. So yeah, I appreciate all that stuff too. That's awesome. I love that.
Yeah, Atlanta's the best. It's a good spot. Yep.
Okay. All right, nice. I dig that. As far as your film goes and your career wise goes, I wanted to dig back first into some of the earlier days and and young Dave kind of digging into television and movies. What are earlier television series or movies that you remember kind of resonating with you?
I was I think as a kid, I mean, I owed everything to James Cameron, like, T1, T2, yeah. Aliens, The Abyss. Those were just huge parts of my youth. I think a lot of Verhoeven, Total Recall stands out. A lot of John McTiernan, a lot of, the Die Hard, and Predator. RoboCop was another one. I think I was raised on 80s sci-fi action and horror, actually more sci-fi and action than anything else. I think horror came a bit later because I was really scared of it. Okay. Yeah, for sure.
So as far like you mentioned something like Total Recall, what comes to mind as far as maybe earlier times that you remember like actually noticing practical effects, as opposed to different things and thinking like, holy crap, is this guy's face actually melting off? Like, what were certain things that popped out to you that kind of made you look into further than what you were just seeing?
I think that, I don't know. I mean, I think for me, Total Recall in particular, it was the brain bending aspect of it. It's like I liked the ideas I was pulled into, but the more you watch these movies, you start to see the seams, you start to go, okay, that's a mask, and then that's some other kind of effect that's kicked in at this moment necessarily, or that's CGI once that started to begin. And just piecing together a know-how kind of emerges from that. I also think that, like, I was just a scared kid, so like watching horror was not an easy thing for me to do. So I had to, it's confrontational. You have to adapt to it at a certain point. So you get to know the effects because you're afraid to look at them. And then over time, you have to make a friend with the scary things, and you begin to dive into it in order to demystify it, and then you learn a little bit more. But like when I was young, even like a Fangoria cover would just wreck me. Like I couldn't even look at it.
Nice. Okay. Well, so, and digging further into that as far as when your horror interest does start, scanning through local video shops, what were some covers, some movie covers, or maybe even movie posters that you saw that just drew you in and maybe, kind of pushed you away for a while? You had to kind of work up, a little bit of passion to try and rent it.
Yeah. I remember for me, it was the grocery store. Kroger in Atlanta they'd rent movies in the back. It was like this weird little grocery store, and it was the place I always wanted to go and wander to. But the horror section, because there was always the cover, and then you would turn it over, and there'd be the back of it, and you would have to dare to look at the back to see what it was all about. You would build up the nerve every single time you ended up at the grocery store. But Evil Dead 2 stands out because that was like the skeleton with the human eyes looking back at you. Howling was a great
Nice.
cover. Howling was a great cover. I think Fright Night always seemed like more than a vampire movie because you had the vampire like emerging in the clouds over the house, so it just seemed like mystical and holy what was going on. For some reason, there's a movie I never saw called Future Shock that had a terrifying cover that was like a bizarre, almost like Geiger-esque being standing on the front covering their face. But yeah, Hellraiser was one for sure. I mean, anything that had a baddie on the front that you didn't understand that just kind of invited you to turn the cover over, I think was pretty intense. I don't know like that anymore. I'm gonna hit this on the light.
Sure. Were some of those that you mentioned too, were some of those that, movies that it took you a little while to actually bring it out of the video store? Finally you're like, all right, I've looked at this enough. I think this is, it's about time that I bring it home and see what this is about.
I had a friend in high school, Kevin Coughlin, who really was my gateway drug to horror. And because I had hesitation on things, he'd be like, no, you got to watch this, And the night that he broke me was he convinced me to watch a movie. I forget the filmmaker, but Deadly Friend.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, and I couldn't handle the gore, and I believe a robot destroys an old woman's head with a basketball. And it's pretty explosive. And he kind of found me and was like, no, watch it again. Rewound, played through it again, and you just look at it until it becomes a little bit abstract, and I can kind of handle it. But he was great. He introduced me to like Raimi, and we'd get into Evil Dead and Romero, and like he was big on. He wanted to get into the differences between like why dawn is better than day, and like and then just we started shooting our own movies. We just started emulating this stuff, and so I think ninth grade we made a serial killer movie. Our first one was from a borrowed VHS camcorder. I mean, this was the 90s, and early 90s actually. And then we just kept going, and we would just continue to make stuff. And it's like we were, like many of us, we were the kids that were making things, and we just didn't stop. Yeah.
I feel like there's always that one friend somewhere in these stories, who like for myself, for instance, was all about showing, oh man, you have to see Faces of Death, and then I feel like that was my point where I was like, I think this is a little too much. I don't want to enjoy this. I'm all about the scary, spooky, houses and all this shit. But then you get into that stuff and it's like, I think we've gone too far.
Yeah, that was later for me. That was the aughts when the internet came around and things like Rotten.com where you're too confrontational. You'd gather as friends and look at that for, half hour before you like become overwhelmed with like dread or and just it ruin the rest of your night. You're like, why are we doing this? But was Faces of Death was debunked, right? Or is it some of it real?
Yeah. Well, I mean, from what I can remember, they were saying it was like in mid 2000s. They had said that anything that was in it that had multiple angles, I think was the thing was the stuff that was fake or that was actually shot. So I was like, wow. Right, well, right. I lost a lot of sleep over some of that shit.
Yeah, for real.
But so as far as with having different roles in film, acting, directing, producing. I wanted to dig into something, as far as maybe earlier roles in acting with dressing up for Halloween. Tell us about an earlier Halloween costume that comes to mind, that you loved, and maybe something that you always wished that was at the Halloween store that you could have dressed up as, but it never existed. We did a zombie party one time. I did a pretty good legless zombie, but it committed me to being in a wheelchair for the whole night. It's like bad on the knees. I couldn't pull that off now that I'm into my 40s. But no, in high school, I got my first pair of contacts, and I sacrificed them for a vampire costume and dyed them in red food coloring, which I don't think is safe. I don't think that, there was no internet at the time. You could research how to do this. I have no idea where I got this information that you could do this, Please don't try this, kids. It's not a very good effect. No.
And but yeah, so I had these like red contacts, and I would wear them in school, and then do the vampire teeth and everything, and it was it would upset people, and it was and I enjoyed it, and so that was, and then there were like a bunch of people like jumped on the bandwagon, and then they were like, we had like a whole team of people dyeing their contacts. It was terrible.
Oh
Terrible. And because it was good, because it worked. And so yeah, I did that. My favorite one last one, my best costume I think I was ever a part of was one night where there was no plan, and we had to go to a thing. This was later in life, and just threw on a wig and a sports coat and grabbed like the handful of business cards out of like the business card cigar box that you pick up over the course of the years, just shove them in the pocket. And then when anybody asks you like, what are you supposed to be? You just pull a random business card out and you're like, Chris something or other, VFX supervisor, and just hand it off. And, because I don't know, business cards, I don't know if they're still a thing, but like it was a big deal. You would just like collect them forever. Now I think people don't traffic in that so much. Anyway, those are my, I'm not, other than that, I have not been super inventive. I'm usually put to shame by my peers, especially here in the horror community in LA. Like they go to great lengths. Yeah.
That's funny shit, especially for, somebody to come up and be like, oh, Chris, thank you so much. I've known all your work, and you're kind of like looking around like, oh shit, he's talking to me. I love that. That's great. So what about as far as, in different interviews you mentioned, earlier on with, Atlanta kind of film scene and different things like that, and not so much taking the route of film school, but kind of, getting your roots in doing that. What were some of your first steps into, the draw into making film, as far as, I know that you've mentioned, making shorts with friends and and the film scene there, working with different indie companies. What were some of the first steps into actually getting into the film industry?
I was really fortunate because I'd shot a bunch of stuff in college, and I didn't go to film school. I went to the University of Georgia. I thought I would. I didn't know anybody that was doing it, and I didn't have a way to get in touch with people that were doing it. And it just didn't seem realistic. I kind of thought, oh well, I'm just messing around with this, but we'll see what happens. But I didn't quit, and so I met some people at the University of Georgia, particularly Jacob Gentry, who was just continually making stuff. And so we kind of formed a little company, went down to Atlanta in like 2001, and just met like a thriving arts community of people that were interested in making things, that were just kind of looking for something to do. It was a very freewheeling kind of atmosphere. You could kind of do anything. And we got in with a theater company, Push Push Theater, and I'd done some theater over the years off and on. Their philosophy there was a workshop approach. So their funding was based on, artists come here to try things, and at a certain point they invite an audience in on it. So a little different than having some mandate where you have to put butts in seats. And so we all got together. We did some, I did some plays with them and stuff, and then we started doing. We formed this thing called the Dailies Project, which was. We sort of throw a video prompt out to the community and be like, everybody go tell a story in this park, and tie it together to this one dramatic objective, or everyone go tell the story of this picture. And we collect these films. We get 10, 12 films together for each screening. We'd screen them at local venues. Most of them never ended up on IMDb. Most of them never pushed the festival circuit. It was a very contained effort from a group of people in the early aughts, before the film industry came to Atlanta, or before the boom happened with the tax incentive, that was sort of undisturbed. And so there was no friction to make anything. You could just go shoot something. You had a built-in audience, which were people that would just frequent these different venues to check stuff out. So you could get a feeling for how people react to things. You could tell when they're bored. You could tell when you had them. And over the course of 5-6 years or something, I think collectively Dailies made maybe 100, 120 films. And I did everything you could do on them. And so that was really my film school. This was post-college. And it was just a great, really fertile, rich environment. And I met some of some of my, some lifelong collaborators there, and artists that are still very, I'm still very close with, and it's kind of a sacred period. So that's how I got into it, and we made a movie called The Signal, which emerged from a Dailies project. So I had,
Oh, wow, okay.
there was a guy, Rob Nixon, who had written this 30-minute piece. He didn't know where it was going, and we started talking about an exquisite corpse, which is a process where you start a picture and then you hand it off to somebody else. So I went, shot this 20 minutes, and then we assumed it would be a feature, and then we just gave a hard drive to another filmmaker, to Dan Bush, and said, see where it goes. The actors are down. And so he came back 9 months later with like 40 more minutes of movie. And it was crazy. It was full of all kinds of insane ideas. It was a bit of a mess. And it was Jacob Gentry and his producer, Alex Montlaw, who kind of took a look at it and took a step back and said, this is awesome. What if we started over and focused more on this thread? And that is kind of how we stumbled into making our first feature, my first feature, The Signal. And that really got us started. So,
Dang. Okay. Well, and that was going to be one question too, as far as with the dailies and kind of that environment, where you're surrounded by friends. I was going to, kind of touch on, if there was a thing too where there wasn't necessarily like negative attention or anything like that, but someone trying to, kind of come up and give like some advice, like, I don't think that was, necessarily what I would do here. But it sounds like, although inviting, it was also something that was a collaborative, very open-minded, to everybody helping each other, type of environment.
Yeah, you take input where you can get it, and it was just, we had the theater conversation on the side, which was, of a different focus in some ways. It was very much about narrative and the power of the word and meaning and theme, the art of it and stuff. And I say art in like a capital, formal, academic way. Like what is the relationship of the theme to the conflict, and what's the message coming out of that and stuff like that.
Sure.
And then on the other side, you just had like the movie fan side of it. It was like, can we pull this off? Can we pull that off? It's like, can we pay homage to this great filmmaker, that great filmmaker? But I think you need feedback, and so it's. Right. I think the thing that we managed to avoid, for better or worse, was the thing where you max out all your credit cards and you put everything into a short film too early. And I've seen a lot of filmmakers do this, and they've only got like one or two little shorts under their belt, and suddenly they're doing a huge operation so they can get that big budget pro feel, and now they got grip trucks out front, and they're financing the whole thing, and because it costs so much money and it takes so much out of you, and then you're so focused on getting out to festivals and making sure people can see it and making sure it makes the rounds. If you're too industrious early on about getting your name out there, sometimes you may end up only making one thing over the course of 2 or 3 years. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think, in a weird way, not being concerned with who's going to see it or where it's going to go, and just continuing to make things, like I think that's important. I think that you have to get up to, you got to get momentum up in what you're doing. Get your 10,000 hours or whatever they used to say.
Yeah. Okay. Well, and for the passion, that being a thing too, just out of the love of everything too, so I can appreciate that. With talking on some of your short efforts and some of the things that you did, maybe even with friends, or even something like, we'll say like Dave versus Jeremiah. Can you tell us about a time where you ran into an issue working on a feature film, where you had to, you kind of tracked back to some of your earlier work, and you're like, what, I have a practical fix for this. I've done it before, and it's going to work great. Does anything come to mind like that?
Wow. Yeah, probably so many different moments. And I would say some of it's just stylistic. One thing about Dave versus Jeremiah, it was this ridiculous little short that we did that was in some ways my favorite thing that I've ever been a part of. And it was kind of inspired by Spaced, which was,
Oh, yeah.
you know, there was a scene in Space, which was the Edgar Wright, Simon Pegg, Nick Frost collaboration before they went off to do Shaun of the Dead, where you're just like imitating gun fu and weaponry and stuff, and you're basically just play fighting basically, but you just make it. And we did our own spin on it, and but that so much of the way the jokes would work in that is that you would get into a moment where you're engaged and you're tight on stuff. So there's limited information that's happening, and the audience is kind of, you know, the image is often obfuscated by the perspective in that moment. You're kind of in the middle of the fight, and just how well it works if you cut wide at the right time, which is to give the audience perspective on what's going on. And even though that was like a dirty little short that we shot, you know, in the front yard of the complex that I lived at, you know, I think we had a bounce car. You know, the basic fundamentals of film grammar still work. Like, you can basically making mouth noises and just like, you know, doing this and swinging invisible swords at one another. You can actually construct a full throttle action scene. There's nothing that holds you back at that point. You've got your sound design, you've got your angle, you've got scope because you get wide, you've got a space to shoot in, and you can actually deliver spectacle. So yeah, I think maybe film grammar would be my answer. There's just so many kind of formative, like, I'm in trouble, I'm on a shoot, we can't cover something because something doesn't look good. Okay, well, we can just bounce out to one of these, and it'll be an understated joke, and then I won't have to show you the gag, you know, things like that.
Okay. Yeah, I like that. As far as that short, was that improv, or was there a lot of it that was actually like well planned out, and you kind of had to go back and shoot it a couple of times to get it to pull off?
I'd say that's a kind of like a 3 takes a gag kind of short, you know, like moving pretty quick, shot over the course of 2 days. I think we just kind of talked it out. I don't think we really knew what we were going to say, but yeah, largely improvised, but also, of course, yeah.
It was ridiculous. I absolutely loved finding that. That was funny.
Yeah, thanks for watching that. Yeah.
With mentioning the signal, you know, and that being your first, you know, kind of effort into diving into, you know, making something a little bit bigger, you know, I guess in perspective, what proved as like on the job training with working on that movie that, you know, you may have taken to, you know, more recent efforts with the Night House and the Ritual? What were some things, even with your first feature, that, you know, kind of proved where you're like, you know, okay, I can use this further down the line?
Yeah, I mean, I think first and foremost, just like that was one of the firsts. I mean, I'd done a bunch of commercial work and stuff like that, so I was like starting to get a little bit more experience just in production. But like, so much of filmmaking is about how to move the army to get what you want, you know. And when you come up, I don't know if this is everybody's experience. My experience a little bit is when you come up doing everything yourself, the first time you have a crew, there sometimes is a resistance. You're kind of like, well, they've got this MO for how to do things, but like, why don't we just do this? And there's reasons why you can't do that, you know, and you become skeptical. You walk around, you're like, what's that guy's job? Why do we need this? Why do we need that? I'll just go do this thing. But pretty quick, you realize that, you know, everybody's professional, and like, they actually bring a level of efficiency and focus to the table if you understand where they're valuable, you know, and how to put all that energy together with what you want to achieve. So like, I think The Signal was just a training course in the realities of that, and a pretty rough one. I mean, and I'm still learning those lessons, believe me. But yeah, and I think some of it too was just in terms of narrative scope, like taking on something that was bigger, that had a real idea. And even though The Signal has a kind of, you know, a little bit of a fuck you, like, you know, it's satirical kind of bend to it, it also had to, on some level or another, be a movie, which means it had to immerse you in an experience. It had to scare you. It had to take itself seriously enough that you could be invested at times to keep watching it for an hour and a half. Because when you're just making shorts, you can just be an asshole the whole time and just make fun of everything. because you can get in late and get out early, and like in a weird way, you don't have to commit to anything. And the kind of the narrative responsibilities of a feature film mean that investment has to work differently. People have to believe in what they're seeing, and they have to care. You know, they have to bond with the characters in a way. They have to role play with the characters in a way, and you have to invite them into that. So you have to take your own ideas seriously on a different level. And I found that I really liked that. I really liked combining that kind of immersive experience, that as if as a film director saying to the audience, like, okay, for better or worse, what if this shit is actually going down? Like, where are you? What are you feeling? What are you paying attention to? And so I think going into that, there were discoveries for me that became threads that I followed through on. You know, like I realized making that movie that I was really fascinated in happenstance violence, like the matter-of-fact nature of violence, as opposed to coming up with the coolest shot that I could come up with to convey a particularly terrifying moment. There was something about letting it play out in a medium shot from a distance, from somebody's perspective, in a way that almost felt clunky or awkward, actually scared me more. And and so there were instincts that were kind of for me uncovered on that film that I find myself kind of relying on today when we're doing something pretty high concept, where I seem to just kind of go, as a matter of fact, state it. Well, and now here it is. It's just happening and you have to deal with it. So I don't know if that makes sense. But like, the spirit of a lot of those instincts was definitely like formed making that movie for me. Yeah.
Yeah, sure. And mentioning too, I think it's something I've never thought of. I mean, not working in film or anything, but having kind of that creative control and working on something smaller with just a couple of people and kind of going back and forth, and then going to something that's bigger in scope and looking around and like, well, what the hell is this guy? What is this guy doing? What do I go up and talk to him? Do I ask him is this not professional of me? Like, am I going to seem like a dick? So that is I guess something I've never thought of, but noticing and knowing that everybody is professional on the set and everybody has their role too, I think is a good acknowledgement, especially from hearing people working on that. Probably appreciate hearing you saying that. So yeah, that's cool. I love that. That's awesome.
Yeah, everybody's first film, you try and grab the Apple box to help, and the grips are like, what are you doing? Like, don't touch the Apple box.
Okay. With yeah, right. With VHS, I wanted to move on to amateur night next. And as far as the approach of having the point of view from the glasses, where did that idea initially spawn from? I know you've touched on this before, but just as far as, were there other ideas, with trying to practically shoot something like this, with it, being very, just point of view? Were there earlier ideas that you ended up scrapping for this?
This was one that we came up with quick. The conceit was offered to us. Brad Miska at Bloody Disgusting, who I knew from The Signal, was putting this together, and I was sort of again, I part of me wants to believe. So I even though found footage, some of my peers were skeptical of it. I loved found footage movies. I thought they were a way to kind of reinvigorate classic tropes. Like, you could go in and I thought Cloverfield was fantastic. Paranormal Activity is fantastic. I'd always been a big fan of Blair Witch, and there are many others. And I think, so the idea of like bite-sized found footage, that just instantly I was like, oh, this is going to be great. Mm-hmm. And I really admired the filmmakers that were part of it. I wanted that job. And so my writing partner, Nick Pekoski, and I were just really kind of rabid to find a way to do one that we hadn't seen before. And so POV perspective, and then, like, it just made sense. Like, we basically thought, what I've never seen in found footage was somebody do like a really nefarious sex tape or attempt at a sex tape. And that would just be a bag of nasty feelings that would be kind of appropriate for this format. And where could it take us? And so I think it was pretty built into it from the jump. But also, at the time, people were really processing found footage and the ups and downs of it. And, I think some of the most interesting things about found footage are the immersive quality that puts you in a first-person perspective. You end up naturalizing the lighting. Excuse me. you have to naturalize the performances because it's amazing. You start writing movie lines in found footage, and it just sticks out like it doesn't work at all. So you got to have a kind of verite vibe to the performances, almost like a naturalism. It almost crosses over into like Dogma 95, which was like a filmmaker manifesto, from a decade earlier, where they were like, no script, no lighting, just go in and do it for real. And so it's harder than folks think, I think, in that regard, but it can put you in a place. The idea that the footage is discovered as a leftover tape was sort of an errant piece of the formula that everybody got stuck on for a while. Like, that wasn't actually necessary. And I think a lot of found footage movies were wise to step around that. But for us, the question of how do you get around, why are you still filming, was something that we wanted to sidestep from the jump. And so video spyglasses just made sense. You very easily forget that they're recording on your face. And anyway.
Nice.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I like that. I dig that. As far as the finale sequence with that, with the two characters going up and flying, like was there something more as far as, with a different, maybe even CG, like further on when they're flying, but as far as like the panning up and all that, everything just looks so spot on. What went into filming that particular segment?
It's a green screen with our amazing actress Hannah Fierman and a set of puppet wings behind her that she was fearless jumping into. You get a glimpse of that. And we couldn't get a drone. I mean, it was 2011 when we were shooting this, and drones not really like, we couldn't get a hold of one. So we stuck a camera on a couple helium balloons and just floated it up over the road where we were at, and got a very windy image, and figured we'd find a way to use that. So then we took the camera down after that, and we actually had we had real video spyglasses. So when the camera falls at the end, we needed to convey the experience of it falling. So we just tied the camera glasses onto a string and just like whirled them around outside. And you get the experience of the thing falling. And then you can actually just drop it, and it's all takes place in one single roll. So the final shot is just us whirling it around and then just dropping it on the ground and leaving it there. So pretty lo-fi,
Yeah, I dig that. Hell yeah, that's awesome. Yeah. and I mean, it's fun to hear those things, behind, just because you see certain things. It's like, man, how'd they pull that off? That looks fucking awesome. And that, just the movie magic behind that stuff too. So I always love hearing different things behind the scenes with things like that. So that's awesome. With
my friends are joining. Oh no.
Got to clean it up now.
Go ahead. Tyler Gillette, Greg Bishop. Hello, sirs. Don't you have better things to do on a Sunday morning?
With the unique look and mythos behind the character, behind Hannah's character, were there other takes on the presentation of the character before what the audiences ended up seeing, as far as what you maybe wanted to portray, or someone may have said something as far as a different look? How did that come about? The final look of her character.
Yeah, we had a monster sketch that was much more grandiose, where her entire head was splitting and unfolding, and then we didn't have much money at all. I think we made that short for $25,000, and just pretty quickly realized that we weren't going to be able to get some huge prosthetic head build, and that the limitations of that would be a little bit clunky given what we were trying to do, and because you've got this forced perspective with the found footage, so you're kind of seeing everything all the time. And so it sort of forced us to scale it back a bit. And as is the case, sometimes I think you stumble into a design. So by reducing something that we started into something much more simple, we ended up in a place that was much more grounded and I think scarier for it. But it did, I think starting big did allow us to kind of hang on to some small things. So I think, Hannah looks particularly frightening at the end of that film. And one of the reasons is because our earlier ambitions to go big had led us down a path where we were going to do some kind of CGI face distortion. So in addition to the prosthetic, hanging on to that, like we are actually like pushing her features into an uncanny state, and trying to find the line where you don't necessarily know that that's what you're seeing. And that was something that I think we wouldn't have gotten to if we hadn't started with a different design.
Oh, okay. Yeah, and certainly that's one of those things too where I don't think even now seeing it, the whole thing with it, splitting open and having this huge, thing. I think it's was perfectly effective as far as what ends up, the audience ends up getting, by the end. You're like, what in the hell is going on for here? So, yeah, I mean that's cool. I do appreciate, the effect sometimes too of having limitations and being like, okay, what are we going to do from here? Because that's not going to work, and kind of bring in
Yeah.
the imagination that extra step. And even though it frustrating you, be in the long run, I think especially with this being a positive to the movie for sure. With you mentioned earlier as far as with some of the uncomfortable content in Amateur Night, I wanted to dig into 3 scenes in horror or maybe just films that stick out to you that have been forever ingrained in your brain, things that are disgusting or uncomfortable to watch, shocking, gross. What are 3 scenes in horror or not horror that stick
Yeah.
out to you?
I mean, that basketball scene in Deadly Friend.
Oh, that's awesome.
That
I
was the
love that.
thing. No, I saw Inside maybe 15 years ago, and just
Oh,
and turned it off halfway through. I was so angry. I was just like, "Why would you put me through this?" And then went back and finished the movie and just thought it was marvelous and
mm-hmm.
so haunting and incredible, and a kind of horror that I'd never seen. And weirdly, I would say the ore scene in Talented Mr. Ripley. I don't know if you've seen this movie or you remember, but
Oh,
there's a
yeah.
moment where, yeah, Matt Damon takes out Jude Law, and it's not the violence, it's not the gag. The gag looks great. It's he hits him in the face with an oar, and his face just kind of opens up. It's the guilt and the suddenness of it, and the inappropriateness of it happening in a movie that you think wouldn't get that nasty. And
Yeah. Oh
yeah, I
man,
feel I
I
was
forgot
mildly
about that.
traumatized when that happened. So yeah, that's a moment that stands out. Martyrs stuck with me too,
Yeah.
in a good and a bad way. Like that's a tough one to watch, but I revere it. Obviously, I think it's great.
Yeah, totally,
Yeah,
totally. And inside, they have the Deep House that just I think it's been on the market a little bit, but I haven't gotten to see it yet. But I'm really excited for that. Anything that those guys are touching and doing a really good job with really pissing off their audience.
yeah, yeah.
Pushing them. With I wanted to move on to the ritual and kind of once reading the script, then reading the book after. Was anything in the original script or left out of the original script that once reading the book you really wanted to include? Maybe you didn't get to, but in the long run, something that you just saw and it was like, man, I really want this to be included in this movie.
There were a lot of character beats that I mean, you can't fit the whole book into a movie, and so the script had a life of its own, had gone through development process before I came on board. So I think, as is sometimes the case, I came on board, read the book, fell in love with the book, was also really enjoyed the script, and so um, just some of those beats found their way back in. Some of those the dynamic between the characters necessarily that I not necessarily like there's so many different movies you could write of it, but there were things that I connected to, and so much of it is about just following your instincts where that's concerned. So I would say that was the case. I would also say some of the gags. Adam Neville, the author, writes really great set pieces, and so
Okay.
just the relationship between the characters and the monsters, something that I think I pulled together as a result of the book. But yeah.
Oh, nice. I recently picked up the book. I haven't gotten it yet, but I'm excited to start digging into some of that stuff because I kind of mentioned in the introduction to, Adam's reaction to the movie and mentioning, like just a praise to it. I think, that's a whole other level of, like appreciation out of, sometimes you have authors that watch, an adaptation. They're like, I don't know what they did here, but
Yeah.
that's not my work. So definitely, a high praise as far as from his stuff, and I can't wait to read the book too.
He's been super generous, and the book's great, and it goes down quick. Like you can knock it out in a couple days, and it just grabs you and like holds you hostage. Like it's definitely give it a read.
Nice. Okay. Within the ritual, as far as, a bigger thing being, college friends reuniting and kind of, getting back together. Can you tell us about, the cast coming together, maybe different things that you had done as far as getting down the rapport of feeling like old friends and feeling like friends coming back together, and were there any sort of, was there any sort of description given as far as, for backgrounds on each character?
I find that like I get really interested in just dramatic action, like in a very immediate sense. Like, what is the dynamic here in this scene? Like, who's the alpha? Who's how much is status creating conflict, particularly in the ritual? And backstory is something for me that is a bit more loose. So if it's like directly relevant to what's going on, we'll kind of talk about it. But it has been my experience that it is sometimes backstory, particularly in something like the ritual, because you're kind of in the woods. You don't have production design that has to, come from a backstory. We don't have to tell the story of their lives just in the images that we're seeing. It's more just performances. So I was able to be really loose, and the actors would go off and come up with a lot of sort of the details of where these guys came from. If Dom and Phil wanted to say that they shared a dorm room, and that contributes to what they're doing in a positive way, and it fills it out for the characters, I think that's great. But yeah, I mean, I later I would learn on other films that it's, particularly on The Night House, my production designer Catherine Eder would sort of teach me the importance of backstory as far as informing the design itself, because you are telling the story just with the images. But up until then, I can be a little bit fast and loose,
Yeah. Okay. And I guess too, as far as with asking that too, as far as with it being, a book, and there's already kind of a rapport set with that. That's, more than inspiration and backstory that they can dig into if there's, sort of questions or different things like that too. So. Okay,
yeah, and the language of the book is different in that, like, it's a lot of it's inside his head, drifting in and out of like memories that he had from when they were younger. Would be, if you were to take it literally, the form of this, it would be cross-cutting between their past and now they're lost in the woods and they're being stalked by a monster, which would be a really interesting movie to watch. It'd be a different formula. I would feel more art house, I think. So in terms of dramatic tension, we're trying to get those conflicts into an immediate so that you can just kind of feel them. It's more about what you just said to me and whether or not I'm still angry about that and the next move I'm going to make to you. It's about kind of the scenes on the page. But the book just fills it all in, gives it context, and makes it real in a really interesting way. But yeah.
Sure. Okay. With all the the awesome practical effects and different, set pieces and different, like, different things as far as that we're involved with the ritual. Did you end up keeping anything from the set? Did you keep anything from the production of that bad boy to bring home for your own?
Yeah, I've got the compass from the film.
Oh, nice.
That the production company, the Imaginarium, gifted me, and it has engraved on the back of it, if the shortcut was really a shortcut, it would be called the route, which is a line from the film.
Yeah. Okay.
And it's priceless to me. Yeah. So it's a nice wrap gift. Yeah.
That's awesome. Okay. Did who ended up getting to keep the old monster head? What happened to that bad boy? They go to a museum?
I think there's two monster heads, but one is probably in a vault somewhere. The other is in Josh and Sierra Russell's workshop. Fernando. Yeah.
Okay. Oh wait, I talked to them. Shit, I think they actually showed it when I had interviewed them. I think they actually had it in their studio. Now that I'm thinking back to this, but yeah, that's a dumbass moment. I just started thinking back to it. I'm like, shit, I think they actually had that in the studio. Yeah, I mean, tons of really cool stuff that they've had, and you've worked with them on different, other sets too as well. Southbound. Was there other movies that you worked with them on?
Worked with them on also on Night House. They helped
the Night House. Yeah. Okay.
And they've come on board Hellraiser. So yeah.
Oh boy.
Yeah.
Damn. That's sweet. Yeah. Very, very cool. I love that. that. So moving on to the Night House, digging into that a little bit. First of all, I wanted to dig into the Cavalry Cross for a song that I've never fucking heard before, it felt so reminiscent and so familiar, and it's haunting. It is absolutely, like, I want to enjoy it as just this peaceful, I want to lay back in the sun and maybe enjoy a drink. That song is haunting. Tell us about the relationship of that song to the movie, and was it something that was, initially in the script somebody, had pitched? How did that track come about?
The Luke Petrowski, one of the writers, heard about it listening to NPR one day, gave it a listen, said, "Hey, this is pretty cool," and threw it in the script. And knowing that 9 times, or I'd say 99% of the time, when you put a song title in a script, it's just a suggestion. Because then you're going to get involved with the music supervisor, and it's like a long road to see what you can and can't get.
Sure.
And we gave it a try, and just felt like there was one of like an ineffable quality between the relationship, how the music worked and how the images worked, and just couldn't put it down. So we played it on set for Rebecca, and you kind of operate the whole time thinking, we're not going to get the rights, so we'll use it just in case. And then by the time we got deep in the edit, we realized that you couldn't just trade out a different song. And there was a moment where we weren't sure we were going to get it, and we had to try out a bunch of different things, and it would have been catastrophic.
Yeah.
It just wouldn't work. You can't just, it's hilarious. You start dropping different things in there, and you're like, you realize I wouldn't have done that. I wouldn't have shot it like that. She wouldn't have played it like that. Like, you are having a relationship with that piece of music one way or another. So
yeah, well,
yeah.
It was almost like for the first time, like, I guess with watching Jaws, you hear the music and you're like, oh, the shark's coming, imminent doom. It was almost this time where it was like a juxtaposition where you start hearing this song and it's like, okay, something scary might be about to happen, but then you also start feeling heartfelt and heartbroken over the characters and the relationship that it was had. It was like, am I scared, or am I like really upset by this situation right now? It was very, very, very tearing. So that was a huge thing that stuck out on on the first view, definitely with that movie. So as far as like interviews and different things I've heard kind of behind the scenes, Evan mentions the Adventures of Mark Twain as a reference that he was given for his state. And what can you tell us about this point of reference as far as regarding his role?
It's a clip from a claymation Mark Twain movie, which I have never seen in its entirety, that you can find on YouTube. Just type in Mark Twain, the Mysterious Stranger, and it is it's Mark Twain basically talking to children and introducing them to a concept of the devil, and it's the scariest thing I've seen in ages. And I sent it to Evan as a joke, just kind of like, if you're gonna try and personify the concept of nothingness, or the absence of meaning, and we're going to give it a voice, it's really or like a voice in Beth's head talking back to her. How can you, how performative does one get? How stylized is the conversation? And that was one that we went back to a lot. And anyway, highly recommend it. It's quite twisted. It's very upsetting little video clip.
Okay. I
don't know how much it influenced him or not, but yeah.
Okay, I haven't watched the whole thing. I don't think I got to that part yet. But I just stumbled on that, a couple of days ago in an interview, and I was like, oh, I got to ask about this. How the hell did that come up? But okay, nice. I like that. With the movie, as far as just genuine creepiness, eeriness. I don't really with this. I want people to be able to go out and watch it still. And I don't want to spoil anything and get into like specifics and obviously whatever you want to say, but. As far as just genuine eerie moments, as opposed to reliant on cheesy jump scares or something overly just in your face with no content, were there certain moments as far as working on it for as long as you do and then viewing it with audiences that maybe certain things caught on or were more effective than even what you expected upon seeing audiences watching the movie?
The jump scares were something that we didn't really... I certainly never thought that would be something that people would walk away and discuss after the film. They were, for us, it was kind of motivated by, Beth kind of reckoning with the either or of life, death, how quickly it can go away, just trying to wrap her head around it. So there's a gunshot that's dropped very early in the film, and it's sharp and it's loud and it comes out of nowhere, and it's her kind of imagining his death. And we thought, well, that the rhythm of that is something that we can go back to a lot. So, some of the jump scares, particularly one where Beth wakes up, are about kind of going from, one peaceful state of mind and getting catapulted into this other state of mind, which is like how anxiety and depression can come on sometimes. And so all that was kind of related to her journey. So we did, as far as it being like an effective jump, or that there's a promise that the movie is going to deliver somebody the movie doesn't really posture itself as one to give you boo scares or necessarily startle you.
Right.
So
right.
I think that objective was pretty secondary for us. So I was surprised that they were as effective for a lot of people as we thought they would be, or as they turned out being, because we sort of thought about them in a different context. But there's a few that are maybe a little mischievous on our part, but yeah, that was one in particular. Another that is really hard to see is just the way the environments come together to create an atmosphere. Because I know for me, I really love to pull from a location and really build the story out of a space. So it's abstract the way it's just a ton of different ideas and influences, and you don't really know till it all comes together if it's going to keep you in an uneasy state. If like the word eerie is something that can be maintained or achieved is a bit of an unknown. You're kind of flying blind. So I think, for better or worse, that's something that even for me, kind of stepping back and watching the film, I can be like, yeah, there's an atmosphere, and a lot of that's just getting lucky. A lot of that's great production design, and having a really strong cinematographer. So.
Yeah. Well, okay. With you mentioning as far as going back and watching, is that something that, I hear different filmmakers say that I won't watch it for years. I, might sit and watch little bits and pieces. Once something is, finally complete and maybe to the theaters, do you go back and do you watch your stuff just to kind of even give yourself a little bit of, creative effect for something that's next?
I think it's true. It'd probably take you a decade before you could actually see the movie, really, because you only see, you're sort of stuck in the prism of your own experience with it. So you're seeing that awkward edit or this piece of sound design or like this performance that wasn't as strong as the next or something. And, or you find that like, I find that there's things that I'm still not sure what the takeaway is for the audience. Like I understand the intention of it, but I'm lost in all the questions that we had around how it was landing to really experience it. So I do think there's something that kind of like magical that happens when you finally screen a movie for an audience, is that particularly in horror, because their reactions can be so visceral and auditory, that it can remind you, it actually take you back to your experience with the script. And so in a weird way, you can kind of, you by hearing and feeling their reaction in that sense, it transports you to a more objective state of mind and can give you a sense of what you've got. And so yeah, it's hard to watch any film, I think, with an audience because you've seen it a billion times. And I definitely like to hide in the shadows in the back.
Yeah. Yeah.
Flee out to the lobby and wait till the credits are finished, but come in for the Q&A or something. But like in that sense, like film festivals can be a little tense. But I didn't get to see much of Night House just because we were filming Hellraiser. So I only got to see it once with an audience, which was at Sundance in 2020.
Okay.
So it was a good screening though. Yeah.
Nice. That's cool.
It was good. Friday night, and people are midnight screening. There's a lot of energy. It's probably like the most excited audience you'll ever have for a horror film.
So that's the make or break point. If you're not hearing, at certain points that you think that someone's supposed to be screaming, you're like, oh, well, what's going on in there?
We're in trouble.
Tense, I'd assume.
Yeah.
Right. One eerie thing, one creepy thing I wanted to touch on is a dowel. There's a sequence that Beth stumbles upon a dowel. It begs many questions, and without digging into too many spoilers or different things, what can you tell us about how the actual prop came into the movie? How did was that something that was built specifically, found in a second-hand shop? What is that thing?
Yeah, it's Owen, her recently deceased husband. It's his version, it's his emulation of the Louvre doll, which is actual 4th century artifact that was discovered in a clay pot. And there's a lot of different theories on what it means. I think I'm a little foggy in the research. It's been a minute, but it was used for binding spells. And it was something that was in the script that Ben and Luke had done a lot of homework on. And just a really, really great image. And yeah, so the idea is that he's basically doing a lot of research and then kind of makeshift. He's sort of he's not a member of a cult, but he has he's practicing. He's learning a little bit more to kind of contrive the situation that he's created. And so yeah, and but no, we carved it. It's actually, I have it right up here. So,
oh God.
Here it is.
Holy shit, that is so cool.
Yeah.
So it was made for the movie. That was, I should have clarified.
Yeah, absolutely. So
damn, that is insane. That's so sick. Wow. Holy shit. That's awesome. Yeah, that's I don't know if a good or a bad idea to have in your house, but that's amazing to have.
It requires explanation when people come over. Like, it's not the kind of thing that's idle on the shelf. Yeah.
That is funny. All right, so digging into with the Night House, there's certain things as far as with, I'll just say, shadow play and different things that certainly stick out that may create rational or maybe even irrational fears. And I wanted to dig into some things, over the years of watching movies, maybe, something like water, watching Jaws or the basketball, from Deadly Friend, or like a laundry press in The Mangler. What are some instances of rational or irrational fears that movies have put upon you? Because I can say, after watching The Night House, there's certain times I look at shadows or doorways now, and I'm like, all right, there's not a face there. Thank God.
Yeah. I get really interested in spaces, and changing spaces. Like hallways in particular, I think are always sort of terrifying. There's so much potential with doors open. Something like The Shining or like that amazing jump scare in Exorcist 3. I mean, those are moments that like really.
Yes.
But yeah. Changing environments and changing spaces. I feel like I can't recall exactly a movie that's done that to me, but that's something that I'm always sort of really eager to see brought to film. I think that was a big influence for Night House, was trying to find a way to do that. I wish we could have done more, but it's expensive to build different versions of rooms, to convey that idea. But I don't know. I'd have to think. Yeah.
Were there particular scenes with either the shadow play or as far as like some of the woodworking and that went into some of those things? Do you have like a specific first memory of actually seeing some of that stuff coming into play and be like, whoa, that really worked? Holy shit!
Oh, with like the forced perspective stuff.
Yeah.
So there's this Pat Horvath. I don't know if you know Pat. Is a filmmaker, artist. He did I met him, we worked together on Southbound. He did one of the shorts on Southbound. And so he very generously came on the Night House because I was panicked. I was like, we're stuck in this forced perspective conceit. We want to do this weird negative space play to kind of convey the ghosts, or the entity. And so he flew to Syracuse where we were shooting and would just camp out in various locations and try and find ways to have these different contortions or apparitions come together. And it's real tricky because sometimes it's just the elements that you're using to bring it together, because they're really there in the movie. Like you could walk on the set and go stand in the hallway at the right moment and it would completely come together.
Oh, God.
So it's always great when people can see it on set, because it just, gags, people can kind of rally around them. It's not an abstract idea. The actors can respond to it. I think when he first conceived of the hallway and then Catherine Eder built it, I'm usually busy doing other things, and that's happening while we're shooting. So the first time I visited that particular set and saw the figure kind of emerge from there, I was pretty blown away. So.
Oh, man. Yeah, absolutely. That was one thing that was really, really unique. And I couldn't really even like pinpoint on a certain time that I'd seen that. And I was seeing some of those things. I was like, holy shit, that is definitely effective. You know, has your hair standing on your arms, you know, when you're looking at something. And there was even moments, so I just recently got the Blu-ray when it released on Tuesday. And there was even moments too that I went back and saw 2 or 3 times that I hadn't noticed the first time. You know, I'm just like, it even things that were like obvious, but you're just kind of panned in, you know, looking at a, you know, specific shape or image, and then you kind of pan back and look, and it's like, oh, there's a fucking body there.
Yeah. There's at least one image in the film that no one has ever mentioned, where we were too subtle. I have yet to see anyone bring it up. But yeah, there's a few of them that we maybe were so understated that I'm kind of like, you know, maybe we should have turned.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Challenge accepted.
Yes.
Have to go back and dig a little bit more. Yeah, I can't wait. You know, certainly it was one that I had to go into and I had to watch myself just because I wanted to, you know, kind of get some last minute notes and look at things too. But my wife is wanting to watch it, and she jumps just at the smallest of sounds. So I'm not anticipating watching it with her, but it's gonna be fun. This is look, this is wrapping up on our interview here. I do have one finale question,
Sure.
but I really appreciate your time, and you know, this has been absolutely amazing. Do you have, you know, anything as far as, I know we kind of touched on a little bit with like Hellraiser, and you know, we don't have to bring anything up with that, but do you have anything, you know, as far as like the release of Night House or anything further that you have coming up that you wanted to shout out or pitch out at all?
I appreciate it. Thank you. No, I mean, Night House just went on Blu-ray, which has been great. It's been awesome to see VHS 94 get out there. So
yeah. Oh yeah, that's right.
such a ride. The filmmakers killed it. So, you know, I mean,
So good.
people haven't seen that yet, it's on Shudder. If you're a fan of the VHS movies, it's pure VHS concentrate. Like it's all that stuff back and done really, really well. And then I helped out on a movie called No One Gets Out Alive that's on Netflix that just came out earlier this month as well. Really, really great filmmaker, Santiago Minghini, who you may know his shorts. His shorts have done the rounds over time. And first feature for him, and really, really scary, grounded, stylized tale. Kind of a haunt and something pretty unexpected at the same time. So I recommend that if you're looking for October Fair. So.
Nice. Oh, is that Adam Neville as well?
It is also an Adam Neville book. It is done with the Imaginarium, who the same people that produced The Ritual. And
okay.
Yeah. So they've taken an interest in Adam's work broadly, this is yet another adaptation for Mr. Neville.
Nice. Rightfully so. I dig that. That's awesome. All right, so we're gonna dig into this finale here. So I wanted to dig into, you know, as far as some of your interests in, you know, being a young filmmaker and kind of, you know, growing into making a full career out of it. And, you know, let's say that you have an anthology movie that you're going to be coming up with here, and you have to put a bit and it's last second and you're kind of having a hard time. And so you retract to the old days, and let's say that you do a remake of one of your earlier movies that you made with friends. With the knowledge and experience that you have now, what would you remake as a short for an anthology movie today? Tell us about what the movie would be about, what it was.
As a short from an anthology movie of something that we already made, what would I recreate? Oh, wow.
You want the fans to see.
Yeah. If I understand the question, you just like anything we could bring back, or specifically something that no one has seen?
Anything you can bring back. Something that you want to just give it a bigger audience.
I'll say we have been trying to bring The Signal back to life for quite a while.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah. Just because, I mean, we shot that in 2006, and all the ideas and themes only became more relevant after the fact. It was about media overstimulation. It was about how too much noise can stick everybody in their own echo chambers, and they don't know what's real and what's not. And you escalate that pretty quickly, and suddenly there's like violence breaking out in the streets. And it's like we didn't know it, but we had a vision of what Twitter would become or something. You know, I mean, it was just like basically the state of social media run amok, and before the big tide change in 2007 when all that stuff hit. So, and it was kind of an accident. It was very much a collective. The project just grew from so many different sources. Like there was no singular genesis from it. So I've always thought like it's just such a fun conceit, and it's such a great way to get into kind of mind-bending horror, and you can endlessly have a lot of fun with it. So yeah, there's been several iterations. You know, we talk about it all the time, but like that's one that I feel like deserves another.
And you guys have had like a draft or something of like a sequel for it though, right?
We had a sequel. We had a very elaborate TV pitch that we took out a couple years ago that we couldn't get much traction on. So, but
oh man,
yeah. So,
damn,
fingers
that'd
crossed.
be cool.
Yeah,
for sure. I love that. All right, look, man, we've gone a little bit over our time that I asked. I truly do appreciate. Thank you very, very much. You know, the Night House has kind of been icing on the cake for you know, my interest in your stuff, and I'm excited to see, you know, what's coming next. And thank you very much for taking the time today, man. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, my pleasure. Cheers.
All right, take care.
He's a lo-fi horror guy. Yeah, he's kind of a guy, but he is so lo-fi a horror guy. Yeah. Lo-fi horror guy has been recorded in front of a live studio audience.